Welcome everyone to ProductTank Nairobi. So we're looking forward to learning more from Felix. Just a little bit of house rules. So if you have any questions for Felix, it's during the presentation, please drop them at the chat. We shall have a Q&A session where we shall be curating all these questions. And just a little bit about ProductTank. So ProductTank is an informal meetup, and it brings together product communities that's made up of product managers, designers, developers, name them, anybody who's building products. And you're currently in 200 cities. It was started back in 2010. So it's a brand that's co-owned, rather owned by Mind the Product. And we've been doing this currently, I think 1.5 years for ProductTank Nairobi. I think this will be either the 18th or the 19th meetup. So we are super glad to have Felix to be the speaker of today. And also, if you're interested in basically doing a talk, we shall share in the meetup community the form so that you can fill out. And yeah, so I think I will hand it over to Felix. So Felix, it's all yours.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay, can everyone hear me? I assume so. Okay, thank you. Yep, so I'm gonna start. All right, so welcome everybody. So thanks for tuning in for today's really short webinar. Some of you guys might know me from LinkedIn. Some of you guys might know me from Instagram or Facebook. Some of you guys might be my friends in real life here. So awesome to have you guys here. And so I'm Felix, and I'm born and raised in Singapore, and I'm a product designer based here as well. So today's topic is really talking about intention in design that really matters. So whenever we design things, we want to talk about the intention behind it, and I'm really deeply understanding that each design should have a certain intention behind or solving a certain problem. So this is something that we're going to share more a bit today. And I also want to walk you through some of the case studies that I've done in the past. So really learning through experiences. So as mentioned, I'm a product designer, and I believe that design should be purposeful, functional, and harmonious to its original intention. And I really believe that design is really a way for us to solve problems creatively through collaboration. So my purpose is to constantly reinvent the way we experience the world around us, that we live in and beyond, by designing impactful products that people love and can use every day. Now, these are some of the companies that I've designed with over the past 3 to 4 years. And they are a mix of startups and companies from all around the world, from Singapore, US, Canada, Dubai. You might recognize some of the logos here. And then some of them are VC firms, and most of them are consumer products. So I work mostly with consumer products, but B2B products are something that I'm working on as well. So all these are really awesome exposure. And if you guys are designers, listening to this, I would highly recommend you to expose yourself to maybe different companies and different startups to see how your design skills can fit into that. So I'll talk more about that later as well. So before I start, I want to share a really quick story. Since all of us are here today, I want to share a quick story with you today. So this lady here that you're seeing, her name is New York City on a really cold, dark, and snowy night. So it was really snowing really heavily, and Mary was sitting warm in a streetcar. And while the streetcar was moving, while the car was traveling to the destination, she had noticed that the driver had wind down the window while the car was actually driving to clean off the excess snow on his windshield. But while doing that, what he didn't know was that he unconsciously let in all the cold and wet air into the vehicle. And when that happened, it made all the passengers in the vehicle feel really miserable. Because you can imagine, let's say you're sitting in an Uber and all the wet and cold air just comes rushing in. What do? You can do nothing except for feeling super upset. So that was what the people were feeling back then. And and when that happened, probably most of the people in the passengers in the vehicle might have thought that fact of life, that the driver had to wind down his window just so that he could clean off the excess snow on the windshield. But Mary didn't think that way. Mary thought, what if we could clean the windshield from the inside so that the driver can continue driving safely and the passengers can continue feeling comfortable throughout their ride. So guess what? Then and there, Mary took up her sketchbook like any designers would, right? And she sketched what would be the world's first windshield wiper. Today, as a product designer, I try to learn and think like from people like Mary to try to look at the world that it really is, not the way we think it is. Why? Because it's easier to solve a problem that almost everyone sees, but it's hard to solve a problem that almost no one sees. So today, I want to bring that mindset, and share a very personal story with you with my own startup journey and how I use design to scale that startup. So before we go in there, I want to share a really quick personal story. So this is me back in 2017 in Korea, and there is a good friend right now. Back then, we were still friends. But yeah, so his name is Won. He's a Korean native, and we happen to be the same age. So we speak the same language. We vibe off really, really well. So this is 2017 when I was in Korea for a solo trip. Now, back in 2017, I was just starting a company called Packdat, right? So Packdat is an itinerary planning platform where you can plan your travel itinerary with your friends and collaborate on their website itself. So in order to, try for a solo trip, to try it out. And from there, I actually meet Won. And throughout my entire experience in Korea, I've learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the people there, the culture. But more importantly, I learned about how Packdat as a product would work when I actually take it out there in real life. Now, that is a story that I want to share with you today. So, back in 2017, when when travel was still around, I mean, today is banned, right? Obviously, but we're all looking forward to travel. But back in 2017, when we can all travel and people were traveling all around, the world, there was one problem that we noticed, that me and my co-founder, we noticed. It was that, planning an itinerary wasn't easy. Now, some of you guys might have found this scene very, very familiar because you probably had, created an Excel sheet with your friends, a Google document, and then you probably had done like hours and hours of research into just building this entire itinerary. Now, when we think about travel, we think that travel is magical and it should be easy. But the fact that we are making this feel like a research project, problem with that. And when we had noticed that, we realized there should be a better way to solve it. And we went to the drawing board because, we are designers at heart, and we went to the drawing board and we came up with this design process. It does look a lot like the mandatory processes out there, but this is more, simplified for everyone to understand here today. So we call this the UX infinite design process. Basically, what we mean by infinite basically means it goes round and round, it comes back and forth, back to the same, understand the challenge at the first one. So the first part of this design process really talks about understanding a certain challenge, which is what, we had been through on the previous slide, which is, the problem of planning an itinerary, the entire research process. And the next part will be research and analysis, where, you go deeper into the problem. You try to understand the problem, deeper than anyone has ever dived in before. And the third one is brainstorming and sketch. Of course, you understand the problem well, then you sketch your solution. You try to sketch different, solutions that could solve the problem. And lastly, prototyping. So we went on to prototype, like the first versions, we spoke to our users, we tested it out. And lastly, we launch and then we test and iterate the whole entire product. And then back to, again, to the first part, which is understand the challenge. Why? Because there is bound to be problems in your first launch, right? So we probably had launched about, 3 or 4 times, and we keep coming back to the same square one just to understand what the problem was with the product and the solution that we're putting out there. So this is just some of the sketches, that we had done in the really early days of Packdat. We were just sketching on our notebook, some on the whiteboard, and just to understand how a user would use the product. So on the top left of the screen, what you're seeing here is what we call the user flow and the user journey, which is sketching out how a user might feel or how a user might use a certain product when they are on the journey itself. So as you can see, when I sketched that, what I had in mind was the type of touch points that a user will have when they're traveling and using Packdat's product. right? And then on the top right, you are seeing actually like a sort of a wireframe that we actually sketched in the earlier days of how the product might work. So, and the last part, which is the bottom part, is just more of like wordy stuff and things like that. And those are actually the sort of core features, the core features that we wrote down that could potentially solve the problem that we are looking at. And this is the product. It's actually a GIF. So I'm going to play the video. So this is the final product that we actually launched. So if I slow down a little, what you'll see is that there are actually places on the itinerary itself that you can actually add into your plans. So on the left side, here are all your plans that you can add in. So let's say if I add Golden Gate Bridge, if I press in the Golden Gate Bridge, it actually shows me more information about that place, and I can actually add this place into my itinerary simply, right? So I don't have to plan, I don't have to research. I come to this platform, I can invite my friends, and at the end of the day, I can print it out as PDF. And we also had a really, really smart feature, right? One of the smartest feature that we implemented here was actually what we call Smart Route My Trip. So what does this do is that, one of the problems that travelers face that we understood was that when we travel, when we take a piece of paper of itinerary, let's say if I go to Korea, I take this piece of paper, the problem with that paper is that it's not optimized according to the route, right? So it's not optimized according to point A to point B. But so end up what travelers doing, is that they try to fulfill everything on their itinerary, and they end up spending a lot of time traveling back and forth, spending a lot of money on the travel itself, on the transportation itself. So this is probably one of the problems that you might face. And me and my founders, we thought of a really simple way to solve that. We integrated it with the Google Maps so that after you plan all your itineraries, immediately you press a button and every single thing will be arranged for you automatically within just like 3 seconds to optimize from point A to point B, so that we save you time on transportation and we save you the cost as well. So that was one of the smartest features that we implement that saw huge growth. So after we launched this platform, this email, as you can see, is dated back in 2017, October 2017 on the top right. And this was actually the first email, one of the first emails that we sent out to try to raise funds, for this startup. So as you can see, this is my Chinese name, Zheng Te. Some of the guys here might know. But yeah, so I went out there, try to raise fund, and I said, hey, I came across a profile when I'm looking for angel investors. I'm working on Packdat, that helps travel and things like that, right? So I said, would it make sense for you to review and then have us walk through this in person and stuff like that? So at the end of the day, we didn't receive any replies from a lot of investors. I think we got rejected a lot of times, and those were the moments where as a founder yourself, after you launch a product, you see a bit of growth but not enough, and you want to raise funds just so that you can sustain yourself, and people just reject you. You ultimately think that the launch did not take off, right? Because we launched a product that we thought might work, right? We thought that people might use it and people will just use it when they travel, but it did not, right? The rocket ship that we were building for months did not take off, right? And of course, no one wanted to fund that, right? So one of the questions that we ask ourselves, or rather you should ask yourself when you're building product as well, is that when you're running out of time and money, what do you do, right? In that situation, what do you do, right? You have put in all your resources into building something. You're putting all your time and money into designing a product that you think that people can use. What do you do when you're running out of both time and money? So back then, you could either raise the white flag or you could press on. In the words of Steve Jobs, we would call that, stay hungry and stay foolish. So you could either raise the white flag or you could stay hungry and stay foolish. And you probably might have guessed what we did, right? Of course, we stayed really hungry and really, really foolish. And we went on and we turned to design, because design was the only thing that we knew, right? There was nothing there left except that we knew about design. And we turned to the idea of design, that we have always believed that design can be used to solving the world's biggest problem, right? Including ours. And what we did next, we called our user, we emailed them, we asked for feedback. And for most people that are willing, we actually met them up in person for coffee. And we actually listen with a lot of intention. There's a difference between like listening and listening with intention. When you actually listen with intention, you actually listen with a lot of empathy, a lot of care of what the other person is saying. And that is incredibly important in design, because when you do that, you tend to understand the problem a lot more and not the solution. Because what you want to understand in design is the problem, less the solution. It's sort of like a mathematical equation, you see. the solution can be anything, right? The solution can be any number, X, Y, Z, but the problem is always a constant. Now, if you don't understand the constant well enough, you probably might never be able to get the solution out there. So that's the simplest analogy to why design is all about, falling in love with the problem and not the solution. And of course, we figure out the victim, not the victim, the culprit that was hindering the growth was that since we actually had a really, really smart feature that allows you to just route everything by Google Map in just one click, push of a button, we actually made that sort of like mandatory for you to share with your friends. So every single time you want to use that button, we made you share it with your friends. Now that is very, I would say, that is sort of like, pushing the limits to tell users that, hey, if you want to do this, there's a trade-off, you need to share with your friends. Now, the problem with that is that if the users or the users that are using Packdat don't understand the product well enough, they probably wouldn't share it, right? So we found that, okay, what next, right? How do we get people to share about Packdat and at the same time allow them to use the feature, right? Allow them to use all these amazing, amazing things that we have built. So we went on and we removed the share feature, right? So right now people can use it for free completely without sharing. And we bet the entire company and startup on the fact that without a growth engine or without sharing outside of Packdat and with a better user experience, we can see a higher retention rate. In that sense, more people using. And we bet the entire company on the one simple philosophy: that design can solve problems and that people value great user experiences. And I still hold this mantra very true today, that if you are ever building a product that is challenging within user experience and growth, always go for user experience. And we bet that on that fact. And we took away everything and we added one last touch, which was a walkthrough. Right now, we tell users how do they use a certain feature, we become friendlier, and we tell users how they can eventually use this product to help them with their travel. We painted them a picture of success, basically. And after months of iteration and redesign and implementing different solutions, we saw this. An email came through. I think it was about maybe 7 months later, an email came through. Someone called, let's call her Xian, SX, right? She emailed us at Packdat, and she actually sent me this photo. And the photo said that, this was a sunset that she caught and with her family in New Zealand after planning the itinerary on Packdat, that she brought it to New Zealand from Singapore, and that, she was on a minivan, and this was one of the sunset that And this was really a transformational turning point for the entire team of designers and of course developers as well. Because when this email came through, it really showed us that right now, travel can really be magical and easy. That you can have fun with your family and your friends while also having a really organized trip itself. And this photo actually shows a sunset that the traveler had actually planned the itinerary to go with her family. And in mid-2018, we saw 30 over 1,000 successful itineraries created on the platform itself. Just within a year, there was like 30,000 successful itineraries created. That was incredible because we had close to zero funding except for our own pocket monies. And to be able to see people just enjoying the product, I would say would be the greatest sort of success as any designers would want. It's definitely not the monetary things of the startup, but in the design sense, it was really creating a product that solved people's problem. And of course, later, Packdat was acquired in 2018 as well by Passport, which is based in Indonesia. So after the acquisition, Juan came to Singapore, and this was in 2018. As you can see, the previous photo was in 2017. And Juan came back to Singapore in 2018, and we had one of the best time in our life. Of course, I showed him around Singapore as well. And and it comes to really show that when you start to design your travel story, and when you start to design, a wonderful product, it not just brings you, amazing users. It can also brings you a lot of newfound friendships as well. Now, some of you guys might be wondering, can this be translated into, can this philosophy of design be translated into many different aspects of industries, or rather food industry and outside of travel industry basically. So this is called Itsy, a food product that is based in Singapore, which is one of the Singapore's #1 food order ahead app in Singapore. And what they do is that they allow you to order ahead your food and then pick it up later, sort of like a order ahead app, right? And I actually just did this in 2020 using the same entire design philosophy. And I just thought that it's amazing to want to show you that one single philosophy guiding you through basically designing with intention can guide you through different industries with the same skill sets. So the problem that we tried to solve at Itsy was really that people wanted to collect food at a preferred timing, but the wait time was incredibly inaccurate. So the flawed experience actually created a really high churn rate for Itsy. And how do we know this problem is real? We had a feedback from over 100 active diners, and they said that, hey, the estimation of the food time to collect the food is really inaccurate. They wanted a better user interface. They wanted a way to just select a collection timing. And after that, we had realized that 60% of people actually said that they face the issue of inaccurate collection timing, and that 30% of people face the issue of finding helpful information about the restaurant that they want to go to. So with that being said, I dived it down into understanding the problem. Like I say, understanding is #1 about the problem. So I dived it down into understanding the users as well to try to understand, what they were looking for before they place an order. And the first one was location. It was very straightforward that, this is an order ahead app. People wanted to see the location, whether it's near for them to pick up. And the next one was the price range. People needed to know the price budget for each and every restaurant that they were going to. The third one was the customer review. What matters to them would be, hey, no one wants to be a guinea pig, right? And we all want to go to a restaurant that is well established, really nice to dine in and stuff like that. Fourth would be the diet preference. I think Singapore is a very special context because in Singapore, we're designing this product for, there are just a lot of different race and religion, and people have very different diet preferences. So we want to be able to cater for that need. And lastly, personalized information. Whether this restaurant has like promo code or whether this restaurant is closed on a certain day. All these are information that the users would want to know. And same thing as the Packdat, we went to the drawing board, right? So I went to the drawing board, sketched a couple of things to understand how the entire flow would look like, and came up with an entirely new design. So this is not a new design, of course. This is the previous design, and this is the new design. Now, what changed? So by understanding that the information of what people really wanted in the product, we are able to remove most of the things that weren't needed and replace things that really mattered to the users. Now we have the photos of the food that now takes the center stage of the whole entire product, and the helpful information just at the top bar of the whole entire app itself, where the focus should be just browsing the food app itself. And we also introduced a new way to cater to dynamic timings. Basically means that right now you can cater a specific timing that you want to collect your food instead of just waiting for the restaurant to be ready. And after launching that, we did a user test. We found out during the user testing that 100% of the users love the flexibility of the entire product itself, and the engagement with the contents actually significantly increased, because right now, understanding what they want to see on the product, we actually showed them what they needed to know about each restaurant. And next was the post-ordering screen. This was the previous design, and this is a new design. So by delivering clarity to the product itself and highlighting that you're able to get cashback, as you can see on the next page, there's an animation that says that you've earned cashback. We are able to give users a sense that they're actually winning by using the product on itself, and predictability and transparency in timing. So we share with them, every single stage of preparation and collection of timing, just like any food app would do, and really, promising up to the standards of what we're delivering. And of course, from the weeks of the user testings, we saw that the speed of orders now went through way faster in less than 10 seconds. And the cashback triggered over 30% increase in clicks, right? So people really love the cashback feature, and that we are just putting up front for them. So after seeing, 2 case studies and 1, design mantra, we all know that design seems to be the answer. But what was the question, right? What was the question before that? The question is really simple. Why design, right? Why not, marketing, or, it's not that we're downplaying, some other industries, but in this case, why design, right? If design really seems like an answer, so why this? And I figured that it is design, because design simply allows us to solve problems in a creative way. And design allows us to, more than just solving problem, understand the deepest roots of that problem. It's at the end of the day, design to me is about understanding the people more than the technology, right? You don't go to a food store, trying to solve a problem, of the food itself, right? You try to solve the problem that the people are facing, right? And you, at the end of the day, you want to understand the people, not the technology in this case. So I want to give you a couple of things to take away today, before we end the call. The first thing is to design with focus, right? Because if you truly want to design a great product with a lot of people, using it, right? Like just how we bet on the entire company on user experience, it actually takes a lot of patience, a lot of care to understand what you are truly creating for the world and why, right? What is the deepest meaning behind those things? And you need a lot of focus in your design to figure those things out. And next, be really detail obsessed, right? Because the smallest things are what makes up the greatest design around us. Now, I want to bring you to a really, simple case study by this guy called Tony Fadell. He's actually named the father of iPod. So, previously at Apple, right? When we are all younger, we probably have experienced the fact that we buy a phone, we go home, and we have to charge the phone for what? We have to charge the phone for 8 hours or 7 hours, right? And, but one day someone noticed this and he said, okay, I'm going to remove this thing, right? And I want to make sure that when people buy my product, it comes fully charged, so that even after they queue for 10 hours, they go home, it's fully charged, they can immediately use it, right? They don't have to charge again, right? And that person that actually implemented that, was Steve Jobs, right? From Apple. And he was so detail obsessed that he figured all these small little things, all these small little touch points that we often would miss out, right? So if you truly want to create something really great, right? Notice the smallest detail and be really, really detail obsessed with your work. And the last part that I'll leave you is called looking beyond design. Now, we all know that design might solve the world's biggest problem, right? For sure. I don't think design can, in a way, help us with, like viruses or things like that. Those people in the science fields are really good at that. But you have to learn to look beyond design, right? Dare to be different, dare to be bold, and have a holistic outlook on the world, right? Isn't design to just solve problems, right? Look for inspirations out of design, right? Look for inspirations in the food industry, in the science industry, everywhere around you, there are inspirations. So tend to look beyond designs and notice the smallest of details around you. And that's where you can solve probably the next big problem that the world is facing. And before I end that, I want to share one more thing with all of you. And this is called the Amazing Design People List. So what is the Amazing Design People List? It's actually, so some of you guys might have already known of this, is that Amazing Design People List is a community-led platform, talent-based for the designers, just so that all of us, can go there if we're looking for jobs during COVID-19, or that we want a mentor to help us with portfolio review. So this platform, adplist.org, is just started 3 weeks ago by me and my friend, James, from West Africa. We started this platform to help people. Right now, we have over 2,000 designers on the platform that are looking for jobs. If you're looking for a job, you can put yourself up there as well. And there are also mentors from Google, Facebook, people like from Apple, and all of them are there to help you with portfolio review. And don't worry, it's free. So just feel free to reach out to them, ask them for advice. Just reach out to them if you have any portfolio questions that you want. And so, yeah, we have come to the end of the session today, the webinar. And, I hope to really connect with all of you. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to just leave it in the comments below and I'll answer them. So thank you for listening for the past 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felix, for that insightful talk. I'm super excited because I've learned a couple of things. And I'll go directly to the question. So there's one person who's asking very, very interestingly. They're called Sahil. So Sahil is asking, how can they download the app that you've shown the case study? It's called, how do you pronounce it?
Packdat, you mean? Or it's
yes.
Which one was it?
So the
was it the food one or Packdat?
Yeah, Packdat.
Yeah. So Packdat was actually acquired in 2018. So right now the product is not currently available because it has been acquired by a different company. Okay. So yeah, it's not available right now. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So thank you for that. The other question is, how often did you do user research with users when through the process that you shared with us, the UX Infinite design process? How often did you end up doing user research?
Yeah, so for user research, it's really, I would be honest, right? It's really ongoing. So the thing is that this about user research is because the fact that you have done one time of user research before you create a product doesn't mean that you should stop there, right? Because consumers are always changing. The way that people use your product are always changing. There are flaws in your product that are always present, but you might not have noticed. There's always room for improvement. That being said, so of course, what we do in terms of process-wise with user research, what we do is that every single time we launch, of course, we would be very, very desperate or very hungry to learn about the feedback. So every single time a feedback comes in, we study each and every feedback. We test it ourselves. We launch it to more users. I would say that this happens almost on a daily basis, that we are actually taking feedback and actually changing how the product works itself.
Cool. Thank you. So Joylene is asking, how do you find a developer to design your product when you have limited budget? And what if there's a lot of changes along the way? And I like the way your bottom also is disappearing.
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question, right? So I'll come from 2 points, right? So some of you guys here might be, just pure designers. Some of you guys here might be, startup founders and stuff like that. But I'll come for 2 points, right? So firstly, I'll talk about being a startup founder. I think the thing about being a startup founder is that, the moment you start, you sort of have to have a certain curiosity in you, certain hunger. Back then when we started, I was the designer. My co-founder, he was doing the marketing stuff. We had 0 developers at all. And of course, at the start, we thought about paying for people, but where do we even find the money to pay someone, right? Because we were just students, we don't have that much. So what we did was that we literally go to LinkedIn, right? We search for people who are looking for jobs, development jobs specifically, and we reached out to them with this opportunity. And we said, okay, why don't you spend 3 to 6 months with us, see how things goes, and actually help us build this product for maybe 3 to 6 months, right? And after that, if you really if you want to stay, of course we are very willing to have you on board. But if you don't, then we are very happy to introduce you to our friends as well, to help you look for jobs in the future. So I think it's all about trying to convince someone, right? So that comes from a startup perspective, startup founder perspective. And I think from a designer perspective, sometimes you don't really need to really go out there and sort of like find a lot of people, because within your network you might already have collaborated with some developers. So you might want to ask those developer friends that you have sort of collaborated with in that sense. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. So the other question is, how So you've mentioned about being detail obsessed. So how should designers, or rather, what are the techniques designers can use to avoid analysis paralysis?
Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat your question again on the start?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. You mentioned that one of the key things that designers should have is being detail oriented, or rather detail obsessed. So how would you advise designers to avoid analysis paralysis
Yeah,
of
sure.
analyzing things? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing, right, is to make sure that you communicate and talk about talk about things really transparently with your team, right? So because you don't want, first thing is that you don't want sort of like miscommunication when you are being detail obsessed, because I've made a mistake of being super detail obsessed, and sometimes that comes across as super picky, or that just comes across as like, oh, this guy just wants this and that according to his way. So you want to be able to first communicate it in a really nice way and kind way. So this is sort of like a soft skill kind of thing. But I think that is really important for any collaboration to happen. So that is one. The other one, that I often talk about is that be really data informed and not driven, right? So you want to understand the data of where your users are sort of like dropping off, where your users are not using you, and then talk about think about how do you want to use this data to transform your product. Be data informed but not data led, because at the end of the day you want to be led by your customers, your vision and your purpose, not by the data, right? So use data as sort of like a guiding line, but not a necessarily sort of like a map, right? If you get that right. So use data, basically qualitative and quantitative research, right? Use these numbers to match up to one another. As much as you want to use data, go out there and talk to your users, right? So that you won't be sort of like paralyzed by what you're doing. And then also at the end of the day, if you're a startup, I'll be honest with you, like if you don't have the data to work with, that's often the problem, and it's really true. I'm telling you that because most of us here, or most of the people listening to this might be working for a big company, or some of you guys might be working for a startup. But one of the constraints is that startups do not have as much data to work with, right? And that is the problem. So when you face that problem, I will only have one advice for you, right? Talk to your users, right? Listen to your users, email them, have feedback, take feedback from them, constantly do that, right? To reassure yourself. And at the end of the day, I would say this is a startup, right? So trust your instinct, right? Trust your instinct of what you're building for the users. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that. So here, Terence is asking, so what
Hi,
steps did you take?
Terence.
Okay, so you know him or them?
Yeah, I know him from my high school. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Terence. So his question is, so what steps did you take to push your new product out to the community?
Yeah, sure. So I think Terence is probably asking more about the Amazing Design People list, which happened just 3 weeks ago. So one of the things about that community itself that grew within like 3 weeks, and designers are still are constantly coming in to find jobs, find for mentors and things like that. Is about that. It's about, first it's about understanding your customers, right? Understanding the people who are going to come here for, right? So for me, I'm a designer, so I understand how a designer feels. Designers wants to be validated, because maybe some of us here might think that, hey, am I doing the right kind of design? Am I actually a designer? Sometimes people might go as far as to ask, why am I even in design, right? And all these are sort of like existential question, which puts you in what we call the imposter syndrome. And it's actually very true right now that I'm saying it, because when actually someone has the imposter syndrome, what you need is a community. And I think what ADP lists provide, the Amazing Design People list provide, is a community where you can belong, right? It's a community where you can truly reach out to someone, a designer, and share your thoughts, share your work, ask for feedback without judgment, right? Because this is an open community. So I think the first part about launching this out to the community is to make sure that you have your values, communicate really transparently to the community, so that they are willing to take the first step with you, to build this together. So at the end of the day, Terence, back to the question is that, I always say that this community does not belong to me, does not belong to James. This website certainly does not belong to us. We are just people who happen to build this, right? And I think the ADP list does belong, do belong to every single one of you here, designers who are on this call, or anyone here who wants to be a designer. This is a place for you to belong. And I think communication, communicating to the community about transparency, is the way that you want to first launch a product to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with you there because we are just serving our members in the community. We're just the channel to basically bridge that gap between the needs that they have as well as the resources that they require. Totally agree with that. Yeah, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Chirag is asking, so what do you think about design thinking? Is it something that's useful when it comes to designing a product on a global level, especially when it comes to different cultures?
That's a really complex question in a way, but I'll try to put it really simply, right? So the question goes that, what do you think about design thinking and how it's useful when it comes to designing a product on a global level for different culture? And I'll be honest, right? When you design something for different cultures, I was in Indonesia, I was in Silicon Valley, and I was in Singapore as well. I've worked with different companies across the world. And I think one of the things is that design thinking applies everywhere. So we have to be clear about this, is that design thinking applies everywhere. The only thing that doesn't apply anywhere is the culture, right? Culture changes across different countries, across different regions. And the fact that you are using design thinking, the core about design thinking is empathy, right? That is empathy. And empathy is, it always, changes when you go to different places, right? For example, I'm in Singapore, I have empathy for what Singaporeans are going through, right? When I have empathy, when I'm going to, let's say Africa, I have empathy for what people in Africa are going through. Now, design thinking is about that, right? So design thinking should actually be able to help you design things on a global level for different culture, as long as you design with a certain level of empathy and intention for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And also, they're just basically in a nutshell, they're trying to ask you, is it overrated?
From
your opinion.
I think the word itself is overrated, but people don't really understand the practice behind it. Okay. Right? So if you look deeper into the practice, it's definitely not overrated, but I think that people keep talking about design thinking, we have that being taught in classrooms. People, just talk like, like it's an everyday thing, but it takes a certain level of focus and depth to understand what design thinking truly is, and then to understand how design thinking can help you be a better designer with that framework, because design thinking is actually a framework. So this is something that I think that it's not overrated for sure, but I think using the word is overrated, that people don't understand what it means.
Yeah, that's very true. I think this is Raymond. They're asking, was there an example where certain constraints such as technology limited the user experience that you wanted to design or test?
So are there any design constraints? What do you mean? Okay, so
technology constraints, or rather made it based at. Yeah, so, and
okay.
if you could share your thought process where your team went through a workaround against those constraints.
Yeah, so I think the constraint is, generally all about, whether you have the right expertise or not, right? So one of the constraints that we wanted to do was that we wanted to build a mobile product, right? A mobile app. But the fact was that because our developer, he was only very good in web, so we couldn't make the mobile happen. But I think that at the end of the day, that being said, we try to make the website mobile friendly. We try to make things sort of like suitable for mobile as well, so that users, when they travel, when they go out, offline, they can use that website as well on their mobile phone, because we don't carry a laptop everywhere we go, right? So these are some of the design constraints that I faced. If you talk about like, implementing artificial intelligence and stuff like that, of course, that's not within the roadmap, at least for that year. And I think that, but to give you an example, it's really for the mobile versus the website, right? And I think that you just have to make the best out of it, because you are challenging between time and speed, right? So you can either go really, really fast, or you sacrifice some time, right? So what you want to do is that you want to go really, really fast as a startup, instead of like working on things that you're not good at, right? I think one common misconception that people get wrong is that is to work on their weakness, but I think that you should double down on your strength instead, right? You should double down on what you are good at.
Yeah, totally agree to that. So there's one question from Sahil. So they're asking, what are your future plans?
Yeah. So, okay. So I think right now there's like probably, I'm not sure, like 24 people here. So I'm just going to open up to 24 people here. So my future plans are pretty sure, my goal, like I mentioned, at the talk, start of this talk is that, I want to be able to constantly reinvent the way that we experience the world around us and beyond us, right? And for the future, I still want to continue to do that because that is what I want to do through design. And I think that in the future, I want to be able to create products that could be able to have a positive impact on the environment. I think especially creating very sustainable products, right? That is especially important for the day and age that we are living in right now, considering that, we are going through a climate crisis, and so far, it's not really working out that well. And I think that there needs to be more people stepping up there. And I think that's something that I want to work on as well. Yeah, so that's for the future plan. As for the current plan, I'm working with this startup called GoTrade, which is a YC startup. So some of you guys might not know YC is the world #1, sort of like the most famous accelerator, called Y Combinator. Yeah, so I'm working with this startup called Y Combinator. That graduated from Y Combinator in 2019, and they're design lead there right now. Yeah.
Great, nice. Maybe you can drop on the chats the site itself, or rather even the yeah. So maybe the second last question is: will you recommend, or rather, what would be a recommendation in terms of tools for the UX Infinite design process that you showed us for the particular stages? Maybe you can recommend.
So I think there is a lot of tools that you can actually use to design from research all the way. So like, if you guys didn't know, there are actually tools for research as well, not like designing. So design, we all know Figma, Sketch, Adobe XD and stuff like that. These are all very common things that we use, and it's true, you should use as well. But the fact is that there are a lot of, other different tools out there for research. So I cannot really name all of them right here for you, but I think the best resource is to, go to my LinkedIn profile, Felix Lee, search it up. I actually wrote an entire article about the list of resources that you can actually use, right? So I'll put it in the comments section as well. You guys can go and check it out.
Cool, thanks. And this is a question from Chirag. They're asking, so what is important? A great looking design, which can create interest for users, or a normal design with a user-friendly function?
Well, this is easy, right? Get your priorities right. So the priorities should be always in the user experience, should always be about how the product works, not how it looks. So who asked this question? Raymond, right? Is it? Or Craig? Chirag, right?
Yeah,
Chirag.
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So yeah, Chirag, right? Back to your question, always get your priorities right. The priority should always be, making sure that this product solve the problem. Because if it looks good, but it doesn't solve my problem or the world's problem, then it really doesn't matter, like it doesn't matter that it looks good, it's like the world-class looking. At the end of the day, that's art, not design, right? But what you're doing here is design, and design is scientific, it isn't artistic. So you have to create something that really, really solves the problem.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Liang is asking, does UX really need to be creative?
Does UX really need to be creative?
Yeah.
It depends on how you're looking at it. In my word, I'll be honest, it needs creativity. And I'll tell you why. It's not the process that needs creativity, but it's the thinking in between, right? So I'll direct the question back, it's like, let's say, for example, you are working on a research, right? You're researching on something and it doesn't work out, right? The research doesn't go as planned, right? You couldn't find 10 users, you couldn't find 5 users. What do? Right? You go and find more resources, if those resources are not available, what do? You get creative. Exactly, right? You get creative, you make things up, you go and find solutions, you go and find all these things and be really creative about what you're doing through the process. And when it comes to ideation phase, right? Because ideation phase and brainstorming phase is a part of user experience design, right? So when you get to these phases and when you think about a sort of like a user experience, right? Are you just going to be inspired by the rest out there, or are you going to be, be creative, be inspired by them, but still be creative by yourself, and come out with something really, really new? So at the end of the day, it's always a challenge between whether you want to remain mediocre or you want to be radical, right? Radical meaning really far-fetched, right? You want to be futuristic or stuff like that, right? So I would always choose being radical over being mediocre, because you would rather be wrong being mediocre. I mean, you would rather be wrong being radical than to be right being mediocre. That's what I've always believed in, I think, regardless in design or in life, right? So this is something that I think that maybe we should all think about it, right? Yeah. So to your question, yes, I think UX needs to be creative. Yeah.
Yeah, and also to add on to that question, they're asking, can someone who has no design background become really good in UX?
Um,
Maybe, and also maybe
yes,
to add on to that is, where can they start?
yeah, yes. So the fact that I didn't come from a design background, so some of you guys might know, like I came from an engineering background. Um, that doesn't make me any less of a designer, right? I'm still a designer. You are still a designer if you come from business background, marketing background, right? So it doesn't matter which background you come from, as long as I think you are willing to learn and you're willing to start off by learning design. So where can you start? I didn't start off by paying courses to go to GA or just any other workshops, because I didn't have that luxury. I started off at YouTube, right? I was watching YouTube videos. I was watching like Udemy videos, Skillshare. So these are some things that you can start off by understanding where you can start with design. So there are actually a lot of resources out there on YouTube, right? Same thing, go to the link that I just sent there for everyone. Go there, see there are some resources out there, YouTube channels that you can follow. Go there and start learning. There are a lot of things that you guys can learn from, just free videos online. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree to that. I'm also a self-taught. I started out with YouTube. It was really, really helpful. But right now, I'm also trying out reading books. I don't know if you're against reading books, but they're quite resourceful.
Yeah,
And also,
I
thanks
I,
to
I
that,
do read quite often.
yeah. So, are you planning to write a book anytime soon?
Of course not. Like, like okay, so for me, I think at the end of the day, if there's ever gonna be a book about, I don't know, like me writing a book or whatever, it's not gonna be now. It's not gonna be the next 30 years. It's not gonna be the next 40 years. I think. But there's gonna be one and only book, and I think that's probably gonna be before I leave the earth. So yeah, definitely not anytime soon. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to that. So Chirag also asked, also asked, is UX about common sense, or is it about critical thinking? And when you talk about critical thinking, what exactly is it?
So I would say it's both, because if you think about empathy, it's a lot about, in a way, common sense. It comes in hand in common sense, right? For example, let's say I were to go out, with Terrence, right? And I know that Terrence is unlikely to eat a certain food, right? That's because first is empathy, and second is because it's common sense that he's my friend. I understand him, whatever. That is common sense to me that he doesn't like a certain place or whatever, right? So to me, it comes with a certain element of common sense and also critical thinking, right? Critical thinking meaning, let's say, for example, you figure out something about the users, right? The user journey, right? And you have to sit down and think about, what does that exactly mean, right? How are users exactly behaving this way that I don't understand, right? That I don't yet understand, right? And when you sit down and think critically about all these different, problems that the users are facing, then you can truly come up with a solution that really makes sense to people, or that can really work. So I think that common sense comes when you are mostly understanding people, right? Like, oh, okay, he likes that, he doesn't like these. The other part about critical thinking would be that when you're understanding your users on a deeper level, that's when you need to be critical. You need to think critically about how they are feeling, and you need to think critically about why are they behaving in a certain way. So critical is more of like why, and common sense is more of like what. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree to that. So you mentioned that when you're choosing between UX and growth, always go with user experience. So don't you think that you first need to establish the growth engine so that you can get more users to test with?
Wow, so sorry, who asked that question?
Yeah, so, sorry.
Uh,
Yeah, so
oh,
what you basically say
sorry,
that
who asked that question? Sorry, who
it's
asked that
me.
question?
It's I who was
Oh,
asking.
oh, you asked the question. Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So yeah, that's a really great question, right? So people might think, okay, why not have a bunch of users first and then think about the user experience? I think the correct way to think about this is that you don't need to satisfy 1 million users. You just need to satisfy 100 people that really, really love your product. Because this is the mantra of YC, right? You can have 1,000 people that sort of like your product, meaning they kind of like your product, but they wouldn't share it with their friends. Or you can have just 100 people that really, really love your product, and they would, die to use your product. They would die to share with their friends. You want that 100 people, not that 1,000 people. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Luis.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Yeah, that one you can take off in a side chat. But thank you for that enlightenment. Chirag is asking if you're hiring a person, so would you choose somebody who has more years of experience in that particular field, or a person who can create ideas which can solve problems?
Well, this is a tough question because usually people that has experience in the field and they are pretty senior and they are promoted, actually, if they're promoted, to be a senior,
Yeah.
they must have done something right in their career for those things to happen, right?
True.
They must have done something right for those things to happen. So it's a challenge to say that. But I would say that, I would think that, experience and, the ability to solve problems aside, I mean, like creating ideas or whatever. So experience and that aside, I would look for someone that is willing to work hard, willing to learn, someone that is humble, and someone that is, has gratitude in terms of work, right? And it's very, very nice to work with, right? So I would still go back to the point where you have to be a nice person that everyone wants to collaborate with, right? Because if you're good, you're creative, or like you have a lot of years of experience, but you're just not a really nice person to work with, probably no one would want to hire you, right? So first thing is just to be nice, be kind, and that people want to hire you. Yeah.
Yeah, and also to add on to that, look, observing some startups from the YC Combinator is after the startup has gotten a lot of traction and they're investable, and they've already proven that their basically solution is solving a problem. That's when they hire people who have more experience to come and now build up the structures, their department heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
think.
think. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Rene is asking a question about it's called Adapt List.
Oh, ADP list. ADP
ADP
list.
list. Okay, cool. Yeah, so they're asking what
Yeah.
are the requirements to get involved as a mentor on the community?
Yeah. Awesome stuff. So there are quite a few things that we look for in the mentor. So basically, right now, maybe I'll just go through a little bit on the mentor aspect. Basically, to get it to be a mentor on ADP list, you have to send us an email and send us your profile, and we would talk to you more about that. And that's most likely that's the very quick process. But the entire gist of that is that the requirement is that we hope to get in mentors who have the relevant experience, who has, of course, we hope that this particular person has guided some junior designers through portfolio reviews, in particular, has guided through different designers in their journey. So that's the most important thing that we look at. And we also sometimes look at your work to understand that more than just guiding someone, do you actually produce them yourself? Yeah. So I think these are the two aspects that we're looking at. Definitely not quantifiable by the number of years, because we have mentors that are down here for like 3 years or 4, but we get them in as well because their work are truly remarkable and that they have been also mentoring a lot of people out there. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe the last question is, you mentioned that the launch didn't take off. So I'm guessing, did you have investors or people who had already invested in the beginning? And if you did, how did you break it down for them so that they can continue working with you? Because I know investors really look forward to launching a product and also pumping in more money so that it can scale. So how did you go about that?
So you're talking about Packdat, right?
Yes, Packdat.
Yeah. So we had zero external funding, right?
Nice.
The only funding that we had was from our own pocket money.
Okay.
And was from our was from our dad, right? Because one of the co-founders is my brother, and the only sort of like funding was from my dad, and it was $5,000, right? I'll be upfront. It's $5,000, and that $5,000 lasted us through 3 years or 4 years. Yeah, I couldn't remember. Probably 3 years. Yeah. So think about it, guys. Right? $5,000 for 3 years, right? That's the amount of things that I think it takes a lot of different sort of ways to be understanding how can you spend that $5,000 in 3 years, and to be very resourceful with just $5,000, right? So I think those were the days, right? Where you're hungry, where you're foolish enough, you just want to go out there and do something. So yeah, I wouldn't encourage anyone to raise VC money if the product isn't ready to scale. Because think about it, right? VC's money are like your car's fuel, right? So if you don't have a car, why would you need a fuel, right? And the car is your product, right? You want to make sure that you have sort of like, I don't know, it doesn't need to be a Ferrari. It can be like a Nissan, like it can be a BMW, stuff like that. be a proper sustainable car that can move you through time and be sustainable. And then you raise fund to put fuel into the car so that it can run faster. So that's the logic that I always use, right? So only raise fund when you know that, okay, this is a product market fit and you're ready to go.
Cool, thanks. And before we close, this is about designers having a seat at the table. So what will you advise, of course, non-designers about design, how important it is to a company, or rather solving a problem?
Yeah, so I think we are seeing a lot more designers getting a seat on the table, having a voice. So for example, I think everyone here, honestly, you guys can have a voice, go out there, go to ADP list, speak to anyone. You already have a voice. We're giving you the power to do so. And I think that right now even on board, if we look at Airbnb, the founders are actually designers by background, right? So the founders are not like, from like computer science or anything, they're actually from design school, right? So the fact that, a company like that can be so big, right, as a tech company, and yet still have a founders led by design, is truly, truly inspiring. So I think there are more companies that are following the footsteps of Airbnb, right? There are more people stepping out on the board as designers. Even I myself, I was sitting on the board of Passport previously back in 2018 as the head of product and design. And when as the head of product and design, when I was sitting at the board of directors, that was when I actually, bring in the voice for the designers and for the users. So I think we're seeing a lot more trends like that. But I think at the end of the day, what you want to do is that you want to fight for the users, and you want to be able to sort of like speak for them in all these board meetings. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Felix. Anything else you'd like to add before we close the session?
So I think everyone here, I'm super grateful that you guys are here today. And I think that I hope that all of you guys have learned something. And something that I hope that everyone can take away from just design and the case studies that we've been through. By the way, all these case studies are available on my Medium and my LinkedIn, so go there and check it out. I think that the opportunity to be here today, to be able to speak to you guys live, I think there's one thing that I want you guys to take away is that, like through this period of, COVID-19, uncertainty and everywhere around, things are definitely not business as usual. And I think one of the things that you can either take this opportunity as a question, sort of like, as sort of like a test, right? That if you are truly a designer, I think you should go out there and solve a problem. You should go out there and help someone, reach out to someone and help. Or, if you need help, reach out to someone that can provide you the help. So don't be afraid to ask for help. There's always a community out there who's willing to, there's always someone out there who's willing to, talk to you and help you as well. So go out there and just make friends and, be kind during this period of time. And I think at the end of the day, just be grateful, right? So there's a lot more things to be grateful for than just the whole entire pandemic situation. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Felix. And thank you, the attendees, for basically making time for this amazing session. We will share the recording after, and also the slides themselves, and also some of the links to Felix's profile. So thank you again. Looking forward to.
All right. Sorry. Can I just cut in for one last one? I think someone just asked a last question, and I just want to answer that. He asked how you can run a design company. How do you run a company, right? With a heart or with a mind. I think it comes with both. And more importantly, lead the company and lead your people with the heart, right? You want to be able to make decisions from the heart more than the mind. And then of course the mind comes later, the logical part, but I think be empathetic first. Yeah. And yeah, thanks Luis for everything. And lastly, if you guys have learned anything here and you all want to share it on LinkedIn, go ahead, just post it on LinkedIn, share and stuff like that. Tag me, I'll jump in and comment and like for you that post, because hopefully whatever that I share here, you guys share it with more designers out there so that we can all be sharing knowledges. Yeah. So that's my final words.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for answering that last minute question.
All right.
So see you guys on Twitter. Please stay safe and stay home. And let's be making design shine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. See you.
Okay, bye.